7:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Time for our daily visit with the Tennessee Stars, Michael Patrick Leahy. Good morning. Happy Friday.
Good morning, Dan. I have some breaking news.
You have some breaking news. Go.
On Wednesday, our friend Stewart Parks. Remember Stewart? He was a nice kid who was
ran for the fifth.
Ran for the fifth, and very genuine, very authentic. He finished like 10th out of 11.
Right.
I interviewed him. I think you interviewed him as well.
Yep.
But he was at the Capitol January 6th.
Uh-oh.
And he was arrested, and he was tried and convicted. And he was facing up to 5 years in prison. He was sentenced on Wednesday, and the sentence came back, and we don't have the exact numbers. We have two conflicting reports on it. One was that he was sentenced to 8 months in prison.
Okay.
The other 14 months. And so the difference is there's another 6 months for one of the charges. We don't know if that's concurrent or not. So we'll be reporting on that.
Do you think he had adequate representation? Like, do you have any idea?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think they advised him to settle and go for a bench trial from a judge who is not friendly to MAGA people.
No, I mean, you've got people that basically are guilty of vandalism, and they're sending them to prison for years when they finally get their trial, and they're holding them in horrible conditions.
Stewart is a good kid, and in this instance, you can go over the details of it. But if he were anybody else, this would be a misdemeanor, and no prison time. But because he's a MAGA person, and the judge who doesn't like MAGA persons,
is it the same judge that keeps doing this?
Yeah, Judge Mehta.
Mehta, that's right.
Yeah,
Mehta, that's right.
So he's allowed self-surrender. And so I would say, so he's going to prison.
Actual prison?
Yeah, he's going to prison.
Man.
And so I would say pray for Stewart. Good kid. And, we wish Stewart well.
Wait, so, I mean, not to delve too deeply into this, but what exactly did he do? Like, what were his actions on that day? Do you know?
Well, he entered.
Yeah.
The building. And then when he was there was some sort of like little, I don't know, light switch or something like that he picked up for about 10 minutes.
A light switch?
Yeah, something like that.
You mean like a flashlight?
Yeah, even like a long, skinny flashlight.
Okay.
I'm doing this from memory.
Yeah, I get it.
And he walked around with it for 10 minutes and then put it down. And one of the charges, I think, was theft. And so there's no mercy for
my God,
30-year-old Stewart Parks, who's a good kid, a strong Christian.
You want to talk about no threat to the community?
Yeah,
at all.
And a very sincere person.
It's very sad.
Yeah. Well, look, he could have been sentenced to more.
He could have.
And so for a young man of 30 years of age, whether it's 8 months or 14 months, and he'll have good behavior, but he can do it. And but I think friends in the audience find out where he's going to be, and send him Christmas gifts. And I don't know when he's going to report. It could be after Christmas, but we certainly.
Well, we should try to get him on.
Yeah,
you have his phone number?
I have his phone number. We'll contact Stewart. We'll try to get Stewart on next week. And wish him well.
Yeah, and you can pay for people's commissary and that kind of thing. So
there are things that can be done. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And that is just a horrible story. And this is when you talk about prison. I mean, what do we know? What prison he's going to be in? Is it the gulag that they talk about?
I don't know. My guess is since originally he was facing 5 years.
Yeah,
the government only asked for 15, and the judge gave him 8 to 14, depending. I think there was a little bit of sympathy towards him.
Yeah,
but only a little.
Yeah.
So my guess is it'd be a club fed type thing. But it's to be in prison for that period of time. That's rough stuff.
Well, it is,
and
especially
not deserved for a young man like that.
Absolutely not deserved. God, we're seeing
2 tiers of justice, right?
2 tiers of justice. We keep seeing that. All right, let's see here very quickly. So we have an update on education. So you folks heard, maybe you remember this, back, I think it's about a month ago. Mm-hmm. Maybe time flies, but Speaker Cameron Sexton, Tennessee Speaker of the House, was on this show, and he was talking about, and I'm doing a lot of this from memory, but he was talking about saying to the federal government, we don't need your money because we don't want to adhere to the strings attached to the federal money. And a lot of those strings had to do with a DEI, 1619 project, boys playing on the girls' teams, that kind of stuff. And so, the speaker said, we don't need this money. And that's what he wanted to do. And now you have got an update on that.
Yes. And the money you're talking about is education money.
Yeah.
For K-12 public school education. Mm-hmm. About $1.8 billion, 11% of our K-12 budget.
And the left freaked out because they said, "Oh, this is money that goes to the blue cities,
mm-hmm.
Memphis and Nashville."
When Speaker Sexton announced this idea, I was very much in support of it, and still am. In fact, I've been advocating it for about 4 years. And this would be the first time any state refuses federal money. And there's so many strings attached to it. $1.8 billion. There are some reports that between $600 million and $900 million of that money is used is for compliance.
Yeah.
And on November 8th, the Sycamore Institute, which is based here in Nashville, said, there's enough money in the Tennessee budget to cover that loss.
Yeah.
So the working group got started, and I was disappointed. It's our lead story by the comments of State Senator John Lundberg. Not feasible. Co-chair of Tennessee's federal funding task force says rejecting all $1 billion plus in federal education money isn't possible. And he kind of said, there's some things, but not a lot. That was disappointing, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
If the strings attached to this federal money are turning K-12 public schools everywhere and here in Tennessee into left-wing propaganda outlets.
Well, I was just talking about that in the previous segment. I mean, we see this all the time, and we already know that these schools, kids are graduating, they can't spell or read or do arithmetic and all that kind of stuff, but they'll be indoctrinated with anti-Semitism and the 1619 project.
And now they're parroting Osama bin Laden's letter to America.
Yeah,
from TikTok.
My 5 a.m. Yeah. I talked about that in the 5.
So the problem here is that really, if you want to save K-12 public school education in Tennessee, you have to send the federal money back because there's going to be too many left-wing instructions and requirements. And so it's disappointing that State Senator Lundberg came out with that statement.
Well, he's a Republican.
Well, not all Republicans are standing for a strong rejection of federal control. And this is my point. It's a little bit weak. It's beyond weak. So we'll see how that turns out.
Here's my question, though. So you interviewed him, and he says, no, I don't think this is feasible. Well, how does he have a completely different take on this than Cameron Sexton or that organization that said it is absolutely feasible?
Well, I'm not sure Cam has actually said that.
What?
He wants to look into it. And here's exactly what he said. Quote, if we discover, this is State Senator John Lundberg, quote, if we discover some onerous regulation or issue we shouldn't be following, we can submit a waiver and hopefully move away from that. He also talked about the idea of getting block grants to do it. Now, to me, this is just, trying to put a little tiny Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Right.
And it won't have very much effect at all. And the desired effect is, what's the problem right now? Why should patriotic Americans send their kids to K-12 public schools that are going to propagandize them in their attitudes against American principles? It doesn't make any sense.
And the difference is, we know that colleges are progressive and leftist, and we have a choice as to whether or not we send our kids to college.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about K through 12, I mean, you don't have a choice.
Well, you do have a choice, but it's a very difficult choice.
Yes, it's a very difficult
Particularly
choice.
if you're in a rural area and there's not a lot of options. You can homeschool. Exactly right. That's very difficult.
Yep.
And I note that State Senator Lundberg is from Bristol, East Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And I also say a lot of opposition to sending federal money back, as well as school choice, comes from rural school districts, because in those rural school districts, the K-12 public schools are oftentimes the largest employers and teachers unions
Yep,
have big political impact there, even in Republican districts.
We don't need the money from the feds. I mean, at least according to the Sycamore Institute and Cameron Sexton, he pointed out, I'm going from memory, but we have enough that we can say goodbye to this funding, and the education of our kids will not be impacted in a negative way. It would actually improve their education because then they could focus on the stuff that really matters.
Like reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Like reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Yeah. Boy, what a radical idea, Dan. Well, the problem is this is a political problem, and you need political will to make this rejection of federal money happen. And this this task force that's been set up, this working group, is really setting up a series of objections to doing it. And what's needed here is strong leadership that says, this is what we want to do. We want to send the money back. And I'm not seeing that right now.
Let me ask you, is Lundberg, is he part of this working group?
Yeah, he's the vice chair of it.
He's the vice chair.
Yeah, and he's vice chair of the education committee. So I think...
How many people are on this group? Do you know?
I think there's like 10. Yeah, there's 10. But it's really been used as an opportunity for the Democrats on the group to make the political argument that, well, we need all this money for X, Y, and Z. And so it's not had the intended effect, which was to lay out the case strongly for why the federal money to K-12 public education in Tennessee should be rejected. And that is, at this point, very disappointing. However, listeners here and activists, I think, may have their voices heard with members of the Tennessee General Assembly as this is taken up when the General Assembly reconvenes in January.
I was going to ask, so, and you may or may not know this. So when this panel comes back, there's 10 people on this panel. So what do? Write a report and they submit it? Do they vote? What's the end result of this whole thing?
They will have a report, and they will submit it to the General Assembly when it convenes in the various committees, education committees that address it in January. And it looks like we're foreshadowing a very weak and watered down set of projections, which are going to say, maybe these regulations, maybe we block granted, is not going to have the powerful impact that rejecting all of those federal funds would have.
Who decided who is on this panel?
Speaker Sexton.
So can't I'm going to use a word, and it's probably the inappropriate word, but can't you rig these panels? Can you put people on there that you know are strong conservatives who feel passionately about education, and then you can put people like Lundberg on there? I mean, in other words, do we have the right people on the panel?
I'll tell you who's not on the panel. Scott Sapicki.
I was going to ask, is Scott Sapicki on the panel?
Why, from Murray County.
Of all the people, that guy is, and I've interviewed him, he's on Murphy's show all the time. He is so passionate about education. How would he not be on the panel?
Well, that's a question for Speaker Sexton. The question I would ask Speaker Sexton is, why didn't you put Scott Sapicki to head this working group? That would be my question.
Yeah, because it's almost like I'm thinking about through all of this. So it sounds like he wanted to have the working group, and he wanted to get the street cred of really, passionate conservatives, but he wanted to put the people on the panel that would give a very lukewarm response. So he sets up the panel to get maybe some street cred, but the people he puts on the panel are weak when it comes to conservatism and education. I may be spitballing. Maybe I'm wrong. You had that look on your face like, Mandis, you're way off base. I saw that.
No, that's not the look.
Oh, is that not the look? Okay.
The look is, well, why don't we invite Speaker Sexton to come on and ask him that question?
Sure. You know what? We can have he and Scott Sapicki in together. See how that goes.